origin of intelligence. Believe it or not, sitting on our shoulders is the most complex object that Mother Nature has created in the known universe. You have to go at least 24 trillion miles to the nearest star
Never
to
existed,
find
man.
a planet that may have life and may have intelligence. And yet our brain only consumes about 20, 30 watts of power, and yet it performs calculations
Yeah.
better than any large supercomputer. So it's a mystery. How is the brain wired up? And if we can figure that out, what can we do with it to enhance our mental capabilities? When you look at the brain and all the parts of the brain, they don't seem to make any sense at all. The visual part of the brain is way in the back, for example. Why is the brain constructed the way it is? Is this nothing but an accident of evolution? Well, one way to look at it is through evolution. That is, the back of the brain is the so-called reptilian brain, the most ancient, primitive part of the brain that governs balance, territoriality, mating. And so the very back of the brain is also the kind of brain that you find in reptiles. And when I was a child, I would go to the science museum and look at the thinking about. Well,
In fact, for most of history, we have been unable to understand what it is or how our mind works. The ancient Egyptians, despite for all their great achievement in the art and sciences, they believed that the brain was an organ useless, and they got rid of it when they embalmed their pharaohs. Aristotle was convinced that the soul resided in the heart, not in the brain, whose sole function was to cool the cardiovascular system. Interesting. Others, like Descartes, believe that the soul entered the body through the tiny pineal gland of the brain. But since they lack any solid evidence, none of these theories could be proved. This dark age went on for thousands of years, and rightly so. The brain weighs only about a pound and a half, yet it is the most complex object in the world. Solar system, although it accounts for only 2% of body weight, its appetite is insatiable and consumes 20% of our total energy. What? In newborns, the brain consumes a staggering 65% of the body's total energy. Bloody hell. While 8% of our genes code for features of the brain. It is estimated that within the cranial cavity there are 100 billion neurons and a number exponentially greater number of neural connection and nerve pathways. In 1977, in his book The Dragons of Eden, for which he won the Pulitzer Prize, astronomer Carl Sagan roughly summarized what was known about the brain by back then. The book is superbly written and tries to present the state of the art knowledge in neuroscience, which at the time meant having to rely on mainly in three methods. The first consisted of comparing our brains with that of other species. This was a laborious and difficult task because it involves dissecting the brain of thousands of animals. The second was equally indirect. The analysis of victims of strokes and other diseases that, for that reason, they often exhibit strange behavior. Only an autopsy could reveal what is the damaged area of the brain. Through the third, scientists could use electrodes to probe the brain and slowly and painstakingly establish the relationship between different parts of the brain and behaviors. But the basic tool of neuroscience did not allow to analyze the brain systematically. It was not possible to select a person who had suffered a spill in a specific area to be studied. Since the brain is a living and dynamic system, autopsy often failed to reveal the interesting features, such as the way different parts of the brain interact with each other, and even less how they produce thoughts as diverse as they love, hate, jealousy, or curiosity.